Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. We're going to be talking about how to raise money for your company, perhaps give you some indication of how you can set a value for your business, and talk to Zach, who has raised money, been there and done it, as they say, and hear his story about his fundraising life. And I know a lot of people have a lot of questions about how to raise money for their business and how to, I guess, convince people of their merit as a business and their valuation as a company. And we're going to get into the weeds on that today and hopefully demystify it all a little bit, because, and Zach will talk about this, I'm sure, but a lot of this fundraising process, you have to ask yourself some fundamental questions. One, do you really need the money? But if you really do need the money, then figuring out not just how much you need, but who you need and why you need them. I think having the right people on board will make all the difference. And hopefully in today's webinar, we'll get into that and provide you with the knowledge you need to raise money for your company if you need to. So while we wait for all the attendees to come into the Zoom, as they say, Zach, why don't we just have a little chat? So first of all, for those that don't know you, maybe just introduce yourself for a minute so everyone understands who you are.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Simon. I'm Zach Williams. I'm the chief exec of a company called CareerPass. We are specialists in what's called the early careers market. So we have several platforms which are all focused around helping 16 to 24-year-olds transition from education into work.
Great. And Zach is humble, so I'll big him up a little bit, but he's built an incredible company and has been through the fundraising journey. So I know we have one particular individual that we're going to be helping today who does want to raise money for his business. So I guess, Talia, if you can look out for him in the audience and see if you can bring him up in a moment. But in the meantime, maybe Zach, talk a little bit about your fundraising experience, how you raised the money that you've raised and what you learned along the way.
Yeah, well, we've taken on, probably can't reveal the full exact figures, but we've taken on 8 figures worth of equity and debt financing over the last 3 years running the business. And I'd say, yeah, that's over the last, most of that, probably 75-80% of that's actually come over the last year and a half. So with fundraising, what you find is once you get started, it can kind of snowball from there depending on the needs and the requirements of the business. We've got a slightly untraditional route in terms of how we finance the business. We, as I kind of mentioned before, we've taken on quite a bit of debt financing as well. We're on a buy and build acquisition strategy, so we are acquiring our competitors essentially in our space. So it's slightly different than a normal VC route, but we started off in the VC world and kind of transitioned out of there when it was appropriate. But there's some really interesting points that I think should come out of today, which is around, you mentioned it at the beginning there, Simon, whether people actually need funding, what are the funding sources that you can go down as well. I think when people think of funding, they immediately tend to think of kind of the big VCs and the TechCrunch articles and people raising X amount of millions at Y amount of millions valuation. And that isn't really, or typically isn't the case, or the journey that the majority of business owners and entrepreneurs will go down. The stories that you tend to see are, I believe, more of the fringe cases. And when it comes to actually financing your business for the requirements, there are lots of routes available to people, which is something that I've learned over the last, particularly over the last 3 years, the different routes that are available. So it's a journey that beats you up as well. It's a sales process. There's a huge amount of rejection involved, but it is a process, and there are steps that you can follow if you know kind of the route to go down.
So you mentioned there a little bit about debt financing. Can you just explain to people listening maybe the different types of financing options? So for example, what is debt financing?
Yeah, sure. So I kind of always break it up into 3 areas, and each of those areas has different categories, but you've got the kind of right at the beginning, you've got the kind of the grant route, which is available to a lot of businesses in the UK. You've got equity financing, and then you've got debt financing. Debt financing being when you leverage the profitability, the EBITDA in your business, and you borrow against that. It means, if you go right back to the beginning, we took on an initial grant on day one. I think that's something that people can look out for. Equity financing is great, and that tends to be what you hear about, but that's dilutive to the owners, to entrepreneurs. It has its pros and it has its cons. And debt financing, again, it's more risky to some extent to the entrepreneur, because you're borrowing that money that you eventually have to pay back. But it means, for instance, in my case, I can hold on to more equity within the business, which is a key driver for my motivation as well.
Cool. I guess there's also the fringes things which we won't cover in today's session, but just for people to make notes. You've got crowdfunding sites and crowdfunding methods like Crowdcube and Seeders. Yeah. And then you've got product-based, normally crowdfunding sites like Kickstarter and Indiegogo. So they're you can put up your product idea on these sites, and people can fund the idea. And when you've got the funding, you can then go make the idea real and deliver the product to people. And you've got, of course, platforms like GoFundMe, who the Purposeful project is teaming up with at the moment. But they won't. The funding requirements aren't necessarily anything to do with the fundamentals of a business. Often they're an emotional story or a purpose you believe in, and people will put money into that cause. So there's a lot of platforms out there that can be very useful. I think we're going to talk a little bit about, I guess, ultimately getting money from angels, getting money from VCs, getting money from institutions that typically invest in businesses. I think we can probably all cross out banks as an option these days. When my father started his business, he walked into the Midland Bank in the UK and said, "This is what I'm doing." And they said, "Oh, like your business plan," and they gave him £50,000. That doesn't really happen anymore. And if anyone has a story to the contrary, I'd be interested to hear, but it doesn't really happen anymore. So we're going to focus purely on what we see as the direct method, not crowdfunding and those sites, but the direct method. That's Zach's experience, and that's what we're going to focus on today. So we set up this session today because someone on our Discord channel called Stephen talked about how he's got a business that he wants to raise money for. And during the Discord town hall, we gave him some advice, but we wanted to go a little deeper and give him personally a more one-on-one session to help him. So Stephen's here, and what we wanted to do was, while teaching, I guess, Stephen what we know and helping Stephen with his particular business, is hopefully also teach the many people listening right now. So Stephen, do you want to on mic, say hello, tell everyone a little bit about your business?
Hi Simon. Hi Zach. Thanks for the opportunity. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Yeah, perfect. Hi everyone. Appreciate Simon's time. Is very valuable, and everyone's listening. Hello everyone. I started a business called Litmus. It's an ed tech platform in Web3, built on the Near blockchain, and essentially we're changing one career at a time. That's what we're doing, and we're doing this by essentially turning resumes, putting on chain onto the blockchain, and instead of everyone being examined by their qualifications, we're looking at how do we make sure everyone has an equal opportunity in education, right? So every employer always says we want equal opportunities for all, but getting your foot onto the doorsteps to have an interview, to have a job, it's really difficult nowadays, right? And there's only going to be more competition, and I think the education system needs to be reformed. There needs to be changes made, and I think transparency, an open education, system where, you know, there's equal opportunities, I think that's where, you know, we can come in and make a difference. That's you know, the elevator pitch.
Well said, Stephen, and very exciting, links to my personal belief as well. The education system definitely needs updating. So look, I think let's just cover some of the ground we covered in the Discord. For those that are listening in, maybe we can just cover some of the things that were already talked about. So just to say, everybody listening, at the end you can ask questions. So the hundreds of people on TikTok and the people attending the actual Zoom right now, if you have a question about anything we're talking about today around raising money for your business or valuing your business, if we don't answer it in the next 20 minutes or so, you can ask a question. So just keep that in mind. So Stephen, maybe just recall a little bit of what you took away from the Discord chat with myself and Zach a few days ago. And then we can clarify that what you heard was right. And we can maybe then get into your particular case a little bit more.
Yeah, sure. So I think I took away that I think fundraising is, you know, it's especially difficult. And Zach made a really good point around, you know, it's a kind of like a no game. Like, you know, you just have to keep at it, keep trying. There's going to be a lot of no's, a lot of rejections, and you know, that's the part of the game, is part of like being an entrepreneur. It's like, you know, you just have to keep moving forward, and just keep tailoring it, keep improving, keep getting feedback, and I think that, you know, even today I'm getting feedback which is fantastic, it's invaluable. So I'm learning every day. That's one of the key takeaways I got from Zach. But I think also there was a really great question that you asked about valuation as well. I think just kind of figuring out, like, you know, to the point, you know, what is the ask, you know, what is it I want, and why, and also and justifying it basically. So I did kind of figure out, I lost my voice there. I did figure out, like, in terms of competition, I did actually have a really great tip from Zach again about looking into Crunchbase and doing some research on, you know, competitors, but also how much they raised, right? So I looked into that more deeply, and you know, I think it justifies kind of like my initial valuation. I think the tricky question I've always kind of thought about is, like, you know, how do you justify your valuation at such an early stage for a startup that you're, you know, building in tech? It's really difficult when you don't have a lot of traction and you're not revenue generating. It's much easier when you do have revenue, of course. So figuring that out and figuring out, like, what is a fair valuation, you know, what is my ask, you know, like, what is the minimal ask I could ask for to build a team to then, you know, essentially build a product that is going to be market ready. So those are the things I was like, it's in my head, and that's my key takeaway. Simon, you're on mute, I think.
I did the classic Zoom thing, didn't I? Yeah, no, I guess, Zach, feel free to chime in if you think anything missed that's important. But I think the thing I took away from it as well is that, you know, reminding everybody, including yourself, Stephen, that raising money is a sales process. And you know, you're not going to meet one person and going to give you the money. You know, you need to do due diligence on the people that you're approaching. You need to make sure that you are a match for them and they are a match for you. And that if they said yes, you'd be happy about it, and you know, make sure that they're the type of people you want involved in your business. Equally, you know, what value can those investors bring? I think Zach, before you joined, was just talking about something really important we didn't really cover before, which is grants. I'd love to hear, Zach, from you a little bit more about the grant programs that you know, how it worked for you, and whether that's an option for an early stage startup.
Yeah, I think just listening, pardon me, to Stephen, I think it really depends on how much is required on day one. And I think the one thing which usually gets overlooked when it comes to fundraising, or building a business in general, is just momentum. And for me, momentum is the most powerful force you can have when actually trying to achieve something. So not every business needs a 6-figure check to get started. And I actually don't think most businesses need that to get started either. It's about understanding what's the amount of resource I need to take the next step, but not to take the next 10 steps. And I think when you're trying to look at the goals that you're trying to achieve from the beginning to the end of where you want to get to, it's really easy to just get obsessed with steps 5, 6, and 7 and forget what step 1 is. So I'd always, in your position, Stephen, of thinking what do I need to get me to take that first step, and that might be building out the MVP or whatever it might be for you, but understanding what the resource is required to get to that first step. Because, and I'll come back to grants in a minute, Simon, but the world in which you're in is the VC world, and VC investors invest under something called the power law, which is, if you're and again, might be teaching you stuff you know already here, but a VC fund is looking for you to be able to pay back the entirety of their fund. Like, that's the scale that they want you to be able to have. And the reality of raising money from VCs is that it's only between 10 and 20% of businesses which get funded with VC funding make it to the next stage, which might be your Series A. And then again, it's a similar, slightly more, get to the next stage. And that's because you are given a check, a limited amount of resource to achieve goals, to show that the theory that you had at the beginning is actually being proven out. So I'll come back to that in a bit, in a second, because going back to that point around what's the first step, is there are grants and startup loans out there, which I utilized from day one. And funnily enough, I know Simon was talking about bank loans, but when we started, we utilized the bank overdraft, for example, to get started, which is basically a loan. It's just you're going negative from day one, and it's a little bit different. But I'd be really interested in understanding what that first step looks like, because there are small grants out there. There are the startup loans of up to 25 grand, which you can do. There are ways of financing that first step, because whether you're at the VC stage now or not, or whether you've got a bit more to prove out, we'll find out through some questioning, but traction and momentum are the one things which are going to see you through this entire process. So it's about what's that first step, and how can I actually start getting that momentum behind me.
So Stephen, what do you think is your first step? How do you define that first step?
Yeah, no, thanks, Zach and Simon. So I agree. I think Zach, I think the traction and momentum is really key. And I think, so the first step, I guess, building on that momentum. So I mentioned that in the call, we actually won a hackathon recently. So we went to the NEAR hackathon 2022 in Lisbon, and we essentially won a hackathon. We went just on stage and pitched it to the CEO of NEAR. And then it was really well received. And then they so we're kind of trying to build on that momentum, essentially. So what you said, we applied for further grants. So they have a Meta Build grant, which is like the next stage of that hackathon. So so the first prize was like a 50K split between the team. And then after that, you go into the next stage, which is the Meta Build stage, and that you can raise up to 1 million of grant funding. So that's equity free. So we're trying our best to pitch for that. So that's like our priority right now. But yeah, the first step in terms of like the product is really just honing in on the MVP and building it into beta. So at the moment, we had an MVP that we built and then we presented and demoed during the hackathon. And that one, obviously was good, but I think it could be much better. So we're trying to do a proof of concept that could be taken into beta, that we can then do user testing with, start onboarding users as quickly as possible. And even if we're not onboarding right now, I think we should get as much feedback, as much like, I guess user feedback on both the end user and also like people we want to work with, right? Partners, So in terms of like user feedback, I think the beta testing is really key, because figuring out like the overall user experience, like the flow of the product, what people think about like our key value proposition, the features that we have, so yeah, honing in on the product is the main thing. So I really want to get a few key personnel in the team to actually start building out the core product. Yeah, so that's where we're at the moment.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess, frankly speaking, often fundraising needs to go in tangent with this kind of testing process. But you touched on something that I had experience with when it came to raising money for one of my companies in the past. And Zach, feel free to contradict or give your own view on this. But I also identified a couple of key people that I needed in a previous business called Nest. And what I did was, instead of raising money from external parties, the people I identified as people I wanted to come into the company and become co-founders with me, they invested in the business. So that's sometimes an overlooked method. If you get external money, that's great, but that might not necessarily bring you the manpower that you need. So if you want highly skilled people, sometimes if you can build a package in there that gives them equity in your business, that can be a way of also cementing the relationship between that employee and the company. It comes with some risk, of course, because if you bring someone in and they're not good and they're shareholder and they're operational, you can have a problem. But equally, if it works, it could be magic. The key, I think, is having a clear distinction in the two. So the person buys in as an investor, has equity, and then separately you have an employment contract as part of the structure. So although the deals are connected, if you want a brilliant CTO, they're going to want equity in this day and age, and the best CTOs actually have money because they've built companies and sold them. So then they could invest. And this is an experience that I've had that has been pretty awesome for me. But it might not work for everyone. I've also heard horror stories, but just throwing it out there as an alternative method. I don't know if it's something you've thought about, Stephen or Zach. If you have a different opinion to me on whether this is a good idea or not, that's perfectly fine. That's what we're here to do, discuss different ways to do things.
Do you want to go first? I would just say, I feel like maybe with the stage at which Stephen's at, and I'm making some real presumptions here that you're trying to, it's kind of like the scrappy stage. It's where you're trying to do everything you possibly can do with as little as you're ever going to have on kind of on this journey. And I think it's a really it's a time where, thinking back to it, it's easy to look back now with hindsight and think of how it kind of worked out for me over that period. But it wasn't, there's all the things that you want to do, and there's all the directions that you want to go in, and all the features that you want to build, and all the people that you want to speak to. And I think the only thing that actually got me through that period was just being so ridiculously focused on one thing at a time, and not worrying too much about all, so just listening to what you were saying before, Stephen, and I'll come back to what you said in a second, Simon, but like, if you've just won this hackathon, which congratulations, by the way, that's awesome. One of the first things we won was a like a business competition when we first started. If there's money there, like, I know you were saying the MVP isn't the level you want it to be at to be to get beta tested, but then I also flip it back around and go, that traction is the one thing that's going to get you from A, where you are now, to B. And it doesn't need to be pretty. It doesn't need to all work in the way that you need it to work. Like, our first product was basically, considering we're, described as a tech company, it was a landing page which people thought did stuff, and then we were manually doing stuff in the background. Like, we were just making it work. I know it's very different, kind of how you're building on chain, and the tech's a bit different now, but I think it's trying to understand that, because when you're, the stage you're at now, whether you describe it as pre-seed or seed, or the words and phrases change a lot depending who you speak to.
Yeah.
But right now it's all about the story. Like if you have no traction, which a hackathon's great, but if there's no one using it, then there's no traction. Then it's all about the story, and the story that you're telling to these investors about where this could get to. And that story, and this is what I've kind of discovered, because even when I raise money now, it's all about the story. It's just I'm further along on that story, so there's a track record there which I can point towards, which says I've done what I was going to do, and here's where I am now. And you're kind of right at the beginning of that. And I think if you are pitching this to investors, you've got to realize that any traction that you have makes that story infinitely more credible than every other person that they're speaking to at that stage. So it might be a seed stage fund or pre-seed who are normally speaking with non-revenue, non-product, non-product kind of companies. But if you've got just a little bit more than the next people and can prove out that story just a little bit more than they can, then it puts you so much further ahead than anyone else kind of in that space.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. As I'm
having a snack, so listening and talking to TikTok folks who are asking questions as well.
No worries.
Maybe on the fundraising side, have you, I mean, I think you mentioned in the Discord you had approached people.
Yeah.
So maybe tell us about like the successes and failures you've had in that process, and do you feel like you have the knowledge you need to carry on that process, or do you have any questions or gaps you want to ask maybe?
Yes. Yeah. Great question, Simon. So I have approached a lot of people from many different channels, whether that's Discord, online, even in real life events. I've been to like several Web3 events in the past few months. So I met a guy called Jamie who heads up the Outlier Ventures. For example, some investors from Speed Invest I met through networking events. So I really get myself out there in terms of networking. But even when I have a crucial contact that I have in person, I still find it really difficult to, I guess, get to the next stage, right? It's to actually get something, even get a meeting is pretty difficult with investors. Their time is really valuable, especially in the VC world. They've got like, numerous proposals on a daily basis. So it's definitely like a challenge. But more so, I guess, what else have I done? So I have, basically got a lot of no's, and like Zach said, like I failed quite a lot. I applied to like numerous grants, got so many rejections in emails and stuff. I have got some opportunities, and I think the grants that I've applied for recently, is looking promising. So the Meta Build one is looking promising. The even Simon, the podcast you mentioned with Yatsu, that was a brilliant podcast, by the way. I loved it. It was everything I was thinking about, and especially on the education part, like I felt that was really in line with what I was thinking. So that they have a sandbox metaverse program accelerator. I think it's remote completely, so I applied for that as well. Literally apply for everything that I can that aligns with my vision and what I'm trying to do. I have taken on board your feedback that maybe I should scale back a bit and not look at like things that are not applicable, things like entrepreneur first are probably not a right fit for me at my stage. But yeah, I'm just thinking about like what else could I do, right? And so I guess question is, I'm just going to put some look at my questions that I have. So I think I do still struggle with that question around what I should ask for at this stage, right? So yes, I think the traction and thing, would help, right? That's why people bootstrap. That's why startups do what they can without raising funding and get as much traction as they can, right? So they have basically leverage to speak to investors and maybe negotiate a bit more on the valuation. So I'm purely, evaluating the startup based on competitors and what they raise through Crunchbase. And that is statistically, that's from data, right? So and that is good, but I think, like, how could you develop more evidence to investors? How do you secure that deal? How do you, like, really get an agreement down on paper, instead of just talking about it?
So I'll just jump in with a few thoughts on this, Zach. Oh, please. I feel like you are more qualified to answer these questions around this, but I'm going to quickly say what I think. The couple of things. The one thing about raising money based on your competitors' money raised, the data point you don't have is the traction that they had at the time of raising that money. Mm-hmm. So if they had 1,000 customers, then they've got a proof point that maybe had convinced those investors. Equally, those investors might have been, a type of investor that's willing to take a chance, right? And they've already taken a chance on your competitor. I like benchmarking a company to your competitor, but you have to be a little bit careful with it, right? Because I personally think that the better way to do it in reality is, what do you need? My experience, and I've invested in 76 companies, and every single time I've invested, it's been a different experience. But my experience has been that most of the time, the money's raised on really kind of a couple of things. One is the investors that's in, so kind of whoever's leading the round. It definitely makes a difference because it brings some sort of level of credibility, whoever it is. Also, the milestone goal. So we're raising 2 million, or we're raising 1 million, and with this money we're going to get to here X, 1 million users, 2 million users, whatever the goal is. Doesn't have to be users, but and then people know what they're investing in to achieve what. And so I kind of feel like those benchmarks are probably more important than necessarily your competition and what they've raised. The competition and what they've raised definitely adds some credibility to the need in the market for it, but I don't know if it necessarily is the only way to measure it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think going back, I've got a few notes that I've written down here based on just what you were saying, Stephen. And I think if you go back to what you said earlier on and just reframe it a little bit, which is it's a challenge to get meetings with these guys.
Yeah,
I would disagree with that point. I don't think it's a challenge to get a meeting with them because they're busy and they see loads of pitches. It's your job to stand out to get the meeting. So that it's about identifying why I'm not getting the meetings, not that these guys are too busy for meetings, because they will be meeting with people that they want to meet with. So just kind of even, it's really easy to get into that a bit of a spiral when you're constantly getting battered with no's or radio silence and starting to, you make presumptions around why or why not they might be seeing you. But the reality is if they're not interested, you won't hear from them. And if they were interested, you'd be getting meetings. And if they're really interested, they'd be writing you a check. So it's just, I think that you should always use that kind of lens to evaluate how it is you're communicating with them as well and what it is that you're asking for. Coming to the, Simon put it really well. I'd written down, like, your ask at this stage is what gets you to the next step. So building the business is a journey. This fundraising will get you to step whatever 5 of 20, and your job is to communicate that clearly and concisely in your deck and in your pitch to say this funds, I need X amount of money and this will get me to here, and the rest of the journey looks like this. But the valuation is really quite an arbitrary number. It's a negotiated number. It's particularly at the early stage where it's a little bit different as you get bigger, and it's based on more solid market revenue and EBIT multiples, which you'll find kind of in the growth later stage, which is the kind of the market which I'm in, which has been shook recently with the kind of public markets valuation. So it's a lot more linked closely to that. But what the valuation really is a calculation based on what you need to get to the next step, how big the market is, and what the probability of you achieving a successful exit for those investors. So you're never going to be able to raise a 5 million free on a like 5 million funding on like a 20 million pre-valuation, if you're dealing with a market like that's this, the size that's just based in a business which is just based in Manchester, for example, and can't expand geographically because the market just isn't big enough to service that valuation. But if what you're building is something which can have global application, then the valuation at this stage is an arbitrary number, which is negotiated based on the amount of money you need to get to the next step and how likely the investors think that that money will get you to the next step. So that's you got to be flexible on the valuation, which is why, as Simon pointed out, it's really key to understand the ask is how you need to work backwards from going, what does success look like? And you'll be able to get those benchmarks from the market. Like, do I need to have X amount of users? Do I need to have this amount of, you're building something which I think you're going to have to prove out the utility of as well. Like that's the big kind of swing here, is what's the utility of the project that you're working on in kind of that real world application? Like how will that eventually monetize in a way which is, I'm presuming, going to be a new way of that the market you're operating in doesn't currently do. But that, it is all about, and yeah, Simon said it brilliantly, is just how much you need to get to that next step, because it is okay to put, and this is what I didn't realize initially, it's okay in a funding deck, and if actually it looks like you know what you're doing, if you go, I need £1 million, this gets me to here, when we get to here we'll be able to go and get £5 million, and then we're going to need this after that. So if you can show what that journey looks like, even just kind of finger in the air style, crudely, yeah, that's it. Just how much you need to get to the next step.
And I think one thing that's overlooked as well with raising money is the most valuable thing you have as a founder is time. And you hear a lot in startup world kind of fail fast analogy, which I think for a lot of people in mainstream life is a bit confusing. Why would you want to fail fast? But you kind of want to also figure out whether or not this is something that people actually will want. You don't want to raise money and spend a year or 2 years of your life building something that people don't want. It doesn't matter if the competitor's building something and raise money. That doesn't mean people want it. So there is some element that I still today personally like to spend as much time as I can proving that customers actually need what I'm building. It's not really about convincing investors, because if people want it, you will find investors. If you have traction, you'll get investors. I don't like using Mark Zuckerberg as a reference because I don't particularly like his moral code, but he did raise a lot of money very quickly and very easily. His own words were, we just met them and they wrote us a check, because he had traction. All this sales and pitch and getting people to give you money, begging them, trying to get meetings, it all turns the other way if you've got a business that's scaling, So as hard as it might be to kind of go at it this way around, if you can get traction first, sales process will be a lot easier. If you're trying to sell a dream, the sales process will be harder. It's just natural. There's less people that are willing to take a risk without anything to prove that risk is worthwhile, right? Just a funnel, less people. So the more traction you can get, the further you can get down the line, dare I say, with no investment. In some respects, that can be good, unless it's a strategic investor, right? A good name that's going to give you the profile that you're looking for. But Zach, what do you think about that? But I'm kind of talking about bootstrapping really now. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think it's something, again, in the current market which isn't as sexy. Like, people don't see bootstrap. The fact that there's even a term for bootstrapping, which when I started my business 10 years ago was just called starting a business. The fact, we have to have a phrase bootstrap because of how much popularity VC funding gets at the moment. So, for context, I started with like £700 in my bank account and a laptop, and I, again, without knowing, just basically lived off nothing for, well, enough to cover my rent and food for a year. Took on a loan at a ridiculous interest rate as well, which I put into the business, and like, there's, if you have conviction in what you're building, there's ways and means to build it. And I think that's why that seems risky. It seems really risky when you don't know what the goal is that you're trying to get to, when you're just trying to build without that next goal. It's really hard to take on that own personal risk. I think it took me a while to figure this out. And again, like the whole point of this conversation is everyone's on a journey here and at different stages. And whilst there's some things which I feel I can talk about confidently, there's other things which I am still learning, and everyone's figuring it out. And if I went back to 10 years ago when I was starting a business, these are the things which, even if someone was telling me, it'd be really hard to process, because I was so in it. Like, I was just so in the business that advice that I got from our first angel investors on best practice and how like culture was super important and all those kind of things, like it just washed over, because I was just so obsessed with, none of that really matters, because we will die unless we get to the next step. Like that was something we reminded ourselves of daily, is just like, do not die. Like, that's the job here. Like I between me and my management team, we kind of joke that we are like the cockroaches of our industry. Like, we just survived. Like, we're here because we survived, and other people who raised infinitely more money than we did disappeared. And every time one of them popped up, we thought that was the end of our existence, but we just kind of cockroached it out. So it's not exactly a compliment to the team, but we just survived. Like, we just didn't die. And I think we just had a really clear what's the next step, and particularly with how I run things, and as we grow now and we bring in a more kind of experienced team around me to pick up the slack and things that I lack in. Like I'm just so tunnel visioned on the next step. Like that's my job as a chief exec, is I have a next step which I'm working towards, and that's all I do. That's all I care about, getting to that next step. And I feel like that has to come. It's really hard to work out what that might be. And I just think you will feel this kind of like, I'm uncertain about what's next and how much money I need, like that lack of clarity. Like you're not going to get certainty where at the stage you're at, but you are able to help build clarity in how you're thinking. And that's by going like, if you could just get people on the beta version today, your mind would be so different then, in terms of the request, the ask that you would have of investors, because you'd know how much it takes to get 10 people signed up, for example, and you can start extrapolating it from there. So I'm side note, I've started like a little side project myself, because I got bored and I wanted to do some coding again. And as I was building it, I was getting so obsessed with the thing that I was trying to build, but instead I've just launched a one-page website to sign people up, and I'm just marketing it now to see if I can actually get people interested in the first place, because if no one uses it, there's absolutely no point in building it. And that's like, there are ways in which you look at the world, and I don't know if Simon will agree with this, but I entered my industry and my space like really open-eyed and just really actually quite naive to how the market worked, thinking this approach and the way I want to disrupt it is going to be better, and I know best, and blah, blah, blah. And then once you've had like some market or some industry experience, like your or at least my mindset shifted completely to being so focused on, I mean, is anyone going to buy this in the first place? Because once someone's buying something, you can then start making it incrementally better from then on in. So I've gone off on a slight tangent there a little bit.
No, thanks, Zach. I love both of those points. So actually, I completely agree. Like both, I love the, how much you need to take it to the next step. What is the next step? I really like that advice. And I also like what you said about making sure that users are essentially, they want the product, right? You want to be able to get the user feedback as early as possible. I went through YC Startup School, and they told me that that's exactly what you need to do. Just talk to users, talk to users, talk to users. If there was even without funding or capital, right? Even without a product, find a way, right? Find a way to talk to your users, get feedback, and iterate the product. So I think that, to me, I think I get it. It's just like really hard to actually execute on that sometimes. I think, yeah, so I think it's really early stage. So just to give you a bit of context, this is not not my first startup I tried to build, right? So this is not like I have failed before. So yeah, for example, I actually did almost get to a raise, right? I got an offer for a from an early stage VC based in Germany. It was for a health tech startup, and we did it all like bootstrapping, right? We did it all kind of just like we built a team, got a few friends on board, built a team of 5 people. It was great, like, and we didn't give away too much equity, and I was, you know, there was 2 co-founders. I was one of them, so we were almost there, right? We almost but when the deal we got offered was not a great deal. It was also a convertible loan. We were really thinking about, is that what we wanted to do? And essentially the team then, you know, half the team were students, right? We got them in, and they helped us out. So we got it to a level where we, you know, built a beta, you know, like what you said, and we launched it, right? We got some users, we got some user feedback, but we didn't have that much traction. There wasn't that momentum, like you said. So the other tricky part was the health tech industry. It was really difficult because the nature of what we were doing was very much like, it was really hard to get, you know, end users to on board, get partners, you know, also the health regulations and stuff like that. You know, we were essentially digitalizing pill medications, leaflets, so making them all into digital leaflets. But the issue was there was a lot of regulations, like there was a lot of liability. So if something did happen to, you know, someone who was using the app, and, you know, we could be liable, right? So there was a lot of legal implications. So yeah, so long story short, I think it was really difficult to grow the startup, and we realized that actually this deal we probably shouldn't take. And Simon mentioned about like failing fast, and, you know, I did learn from that. We didn't spend that much time. We spent about probably a year or so in total to actually go from you know, creation all the way to, you know, to realizing we need to pivot, we need to, you know, do something different. So that didn't work out, but, you know, I think I learned a lot from that experience, and I think I was very, very, very close to actually you know, raising, but I actually realized that maybe it wasn't for me. So I guess in terms of the mission statement, like it probably wasn't kind of tailoring to my passions and what I wanted to do. So it's probably like a blessing in disguise. But I guess you know, going back to next steps, right? So I do have one advantage from applying to so many grants. They force you to have like an Excel spreadsheet of basically, like, if you want, you know, let's say 250K for your first raise, you know, what are your key milestones? You know, what are your due dates? And because they're not asking for equity, you know, for the grant stuff, they actually ask you, okay, can you be completely transparent with, you know, milestones, with the dates, with the funding? What are you going to spend it on, you know, to the pound that you're asking for? And that, I think that's quite useful, because then it goes back to your question of saying, like, what is your next step? And, you know, for me, it's like hiring, you know, great people. You know, I think with any company, any startup, is having great people, having great resources, having great talent. And, you know, especially in education, I think that's really important. And I think the nature of what we're building, the product that we're building, is very technical. So we need as much help as we can get if we want to build momentum and build traction. I think we need to build fast in terms of like the on-chain product, like building stuff on chain, like the data heavy stuff, and also building out, you know, the front end for users so that people can be onboarded as quickly as possible. I've always advocated for onboarding as many people as possible in a very lean way, so that we're not spending a lot of time like building so many features, but really just focusing on how could we test one assumption, the next step, and improving that, right? So that's kind of my thinking at the moment.
I think it, and I'll keep this relatively Sure. I think you need to be really, really specific with that next step. And I know we're just having a conversation here, but even thinking about hiring great people, the great talent, it's like you might only be able to hire one person. Like what like it's again, it's, and if you can be because everyone will have that phrase in their kind of phrase bank when speaking to investors and stuff as well. It's again, it's articulating it beyond where the money is going to be spent into what the result of that spending is going to be. And like the how bit is kind of important, but it's you know the where I've found the easiest way of kind of getting money and raising has always been, I need X to do Y and the Z will be the result. And so I for instance, I've just raised a bit of money like 2 days ago, easiest money I've ever done, which was to our current investors. Obviously there's traction. I initially told them a story. I've got the traction now. It was an email, so no pitch deck or anything. It was an email of about 5 lines saying, here's where we are, here's our next step, here's what our results are going to be off the back of doing this next step. I need X. I've got Y committed so far. If you want to put something in, round closes on Friday. And I think if you can articulate that to that specificity, you'll also stand out as well. Like you'll also stand out so much compared to who all these other VCs and stuff will be speaking to, because you can say, I thought about this, I think this is what we need, and this is where it's going to get us to. Yeah. So
no, great advice, Zach.
Thanks, mate. Sam, I didn't know if you were going to jump in there. Just I feel like I could talk about this all day.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's an interesting subject, isn't it? I mean, there's so much nuance to the business itself, the personal drive of the individuals behind the business, the motivations of investors, and it's a complicated subject. We're now 51 minutes into this chat. So I think I want to make sure we achieve a couple of things. One is, Stephen, is this useful? Is there any gaps still that you have? Is there anything you want to ask? And I'd actually like to go to the audience. There's quite a few people that have made some good points and have some questions. And maybe we could also, sometimes we don't know what we don't know, or you might not know what you don't know, Stephen. So someone in the audience might have a question that you haven't even thought of. But before we go to the audience and take questions, is there anything else, Stephen, at this point that you need? You're on mic. You did it. I'm glad you did it. You did it. I did lip read. I think you said Zach is much more interesting than you, Simon. I think that's what you said, but I might be wrong.
No, I think you're both equally interesting and helpful. No, I appreciate your time, and I think the advice that I got was invaluable. I will try and actually take some of the next steps forward in terms of identifying, X, what I need, and what for, right? What is the why? And I do have some identified, even key people that I want to hire essentially. And even if I don't raise funding, I'm gonna do my best to bring them in, some in some capacity. The tricky thing is they all have jobs, they all have things that they want to do. So without capital, it's sometimes harder to persuade them. Is when I do have capital, it's like, okay, like this is an actual opportunity that you can have a job with, right? So and maybe lure them that way. And I have built a team of 5 people in my previous startup, so I do think that anything is possible. Even without the capital, I can still find a way. It's just like, I guess how do you, my question is like, if you were to take the other route, which is to fundraise, how do you protect yourself as well from a bad deal, right? Because I mentioned that we did get an offer, it wasn't the best for us at that time. Like how do you know what's the right deal for you, right, in your stage of your business?
Good question. I don't know why I always want to end up referencing the Social Network movie. I feel like that's like a guide to how some things work and some things don't. But in that movie, I've suddenly forgotten his name, but the guy that did Napster, right, ends up helping Mark Zuckerberg raise his first round from Peter Thiel. And basically, you know, the story is that he was screwed over by a VC, right? The Napster founder, whose name I've forgotten, Sean Parker. Thank you, TikTok. And he basically told Mark Zuckerberg, you know, these VCs screwed me over. So what we're going to do is we're going to go meet them. They're going to desperately want to be involved in your business, and you're going to tell them, too bad, I'm not doing it. Went into pajamas, right, or something. So I think what I'm trying to get to here is like having someone on your advisory board that's perhaps been around the block and seen a bad deal and seen a good deal. You know, it's not a bad idea. Yeah, I mean, that's one way. I mean, the other ways, I mean, for the early stage stuff, I think nowadays things like safe investment documents are what they say they are on the tin. You know, like they're pretty safe, and they're industry standard, Y Combinator and others, right? So I think if your first step is, you know, having a safe in place, can't really be screwed around those sorts of things because it's industry standard, and you know, there's no funny business. I think as you get more into it, be careful. You know, voting rights and controlling interest, and you know, default rights and rules around, you know, next valuation and so on. I'm sure Zach's got a lot to say about that. But you know, I think at this stage, you'd be okay, but it's probably wise to have someone help you. But Zach, what do you think?
Yeah, I kind of always feel you're only going to get as good a deal as the company is at that stage as well. And if you don't think the deal is good for you, I'd kind of go back and look at, you know, the fundamentals of how you pitched it. I think a reality though, taking on money is that each time you take on some money, it hurts a little bit less. You know, there is, you know, the world in which you, as the entrepreneur, command every single point on the term sheet and how it looks, really are kind of is a scenario reserved for the top percentage of businesses, which everyone is, you know, scrambling to get into. I think when you are, you know, running a business which needs VC funding and fits the, you know, the normal makeup of what that looks like, you're going to give them things that you don't want to give. So I always look at, does taking this money on kill us? No. Does it get us to the next stage, to where we want to get to the next step? Yes. Then cool, can you put up with what you're having to give away to be able to get to that next step? And it's just a balance of pain versus actually the ability to get to where you want to get to. So if the money doesn't get you to where you want to get to next, then yeah, it's probably not a great deal. But if it does get you there and comes with a little bit of pain, that's kind of part and parcel of the gig. The more experience you get in conversations, the more experience you have behind you. Like I turned 34 at the weekend, and it's a hell of a lot easier talking to investors at 34 than it was at 24. And that just comes with that. Just can't overestimate experience and time in the game as well. Like it's something which is easy to overthink when you start, but it yeah. So if there's a deal on the table and it gets you to where you want to get to, it's normally a pretty good deal. Yeah.
Amazing.
Should we take did you want to take some questions, Simon?
Yeah, well? I did. Yeah, I just want to make sure. I mean, honestly, the main reason we're here is to help Stephen, and I love helping people in public because I think other people can listen and learn, and it makes it a bit more scalable for me and Zach if there's other people listening and learning. So, but I just before we jump to questions, I really want to make sure, Stephen, we are actually here to help you. So I want to make sure you've got enough for now to move forward, and then if you're comfortable, we can get some people to ask questions. So let me know.
I was just going to say, Simon, on that, Stephen, if you want some, like if you're going out with a pitch deck and you want someone to have a look over it, like feel free to send it to me and I'll give it some input. If you need any intros as well, like we can connect after this and just see. I feel like we're in the same world. I'm just the kind of more of the Web 2 version, and you're the Web 3 version of trying to solve that educational problem. You know, for reference, we just bought a competitor last year a business called graduatejobs.com, which is probably one of the oldest domains in and around the space, because I think it was registered in 1996. So we bought it off of a legacy kind of business owner. And we're trying to find ways of doing something new in the space. So if you feel like it's, we can definitely have a more of a tailored conversation as well, like as and when, because I feel like these are great, but there'll be stuff that comes up more regularly in terms of what you need help with. So yeah,
thanks for
connect afterwards.
Yeah, that'll be great. Thanks for the offer. I appreciate that.
I just want to say a big thank you to Zach as well. He's running a company, very busy, buying businesses, raising money himself, and he takes the time out. So take him up on that offer, and then reputation matters. So please don't let Zach put his name to something that you don't follow through on, for example. Okay, if you're not going to follow through, then let all the investors know. Please never put Zach in harm's way if he does get behind you, all right? Because the reputation is really important in business. You can fail, that's no problem, as long as you're honest about it, right? So on that point as well, there's some people in the comments, and Andreas, I've been watching all your comments and all your notes. I think they're all very valid, very good points, Andreas. He's also offered to help you with his deck, with your deck, Stephen. So maybe click on his link and have a little look there. And someone just mentioned in the comments as well, Jake, sorry. Yeah, Jake, dyslexia gets to me, J-A-K-E, Jake. He said, how do you handle investors who said they're interested, asked for the pitch deck, and then went radio silence as soon, even if you emailed them with a follow-up? We've all had that.
Ghosting. Yeah.
I actually had a company recently approach me to work with me. They did a whole deck on it about how they wanted to work with me, how they wanted to do it. We replied saying yes, and saying, let's meet. And then they didn't get back to us. Like, I just don't get it. What? So it happens. I think a couple of things to bear in mind. Sometimes don't take it personally. A lot of the time, someone's off sick, or they've got COVID, or they've gone and had a baby. Something's happened, like that does happen. So you can't really take it that personally. It could even be in spam filter. So, don't assume that they've ghosted you. Maybe make that the last assumption. Be politely persistent until they either reply with, sorry, we're no longer interested, or sorry, we've stolen your idea and we're doing it ourselves. Just be politely persistent, but don't take it too personally. It is definitely part of life.
Yeah, as someone who reached out to around 70 firms at the beginning of this year, I had a huge amount of radio silence, even from people who were like, yeah, cool, would be really interested in writing a small check. It's just part of the game. Like, if they were interested and wanted to do it, they'll contact you. And I think that's the main takeaway, is if they want to do it, they'll contact you. Oh, plus Simon again there.
And I'm half talking to it's also a cheap lesson if they don't reply, Imagine if they were actually a shareholder and they weren't replying, but yeah, equally in sales, I basically started most of my businesses by sales. I would get a contract, and that contract would fund the business. That's how personally I built most of my companies. You have to not give up. If you believe someone is the right fit for you, you just have to keep pushing to get through to them, and not give up. So, rejection is part of the process, but no is something you actually have to keep going back with. Well, why no? What can I do to get a yes? What is it, what we're not doing that you want? Like those sorts of things, and understand a lot of what we talked about here, what their benchmark deliverables are, what their expectations are when they invest, when they want exit, what their return expectations are, and can you meet all of those things? But yeah, never giving up, I think, is definitely part of it. All right, so there's some hands up, and some people on TikTok also asking questions. So let's just, I'm going to bring Andreas up first, because he's made a lot of effort in the comments, and I think he's got a question. So Andreas, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can. Thank you for your effort in the comments, trying to help. I appreciate it.
Thank you for putting this together. I was just wondering, let me get back, because I wrote it in the comments, but I just want to ask Zach how he keeps clarity.
Can you check your Instagram messages, please?
Can you hear me? Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah, so just to ask Zach, how does he keep clarity on what they want to do, at what stage they are? I think most entrepreneurs like us, we want to do a bunch of things at the same time, and just how does he keeps clarity in his head of what's the next step? I think that's my main question.
Zach, over to you.
Sorry, my internet just dropped completely off. So I've just rejoined this very second. And I missed all of that. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no worries. So I was asking that as entrepreneurs, we like to do a bunch of things at the same time, and it just seems so overwhelming. So I was wanting to ask, how do you keep clarity? How do you keep your sane in terms of what you want to do? And it seems like you come from that space, so that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, no, really good question. I think the reality is it's always going to be chaotic, and seeking that clarity in terms of the next step is always got to be an absolute priority. I think it's just a learned habit, like many things in running a business. You learn how to do it, and I've learned that by focusing on the thing that's going to get me to the next step and the next kind of milestone. That focus has just served me well over the however many years. So I think that's all I can say on that. It's kind of, I can't probably give any more specifics other than it's, I didn't used to have it. I used to kind of try and run in every direction. And then as you build up some traction, you kind of naturally learn where to focus on and where best to put the energy into.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Again, thanks for trying to help as well. Appreciate it. All right. So next up, Lisa, did you have a question? Lisa.
Hello.
Hi, Lisa. How can we help
today? Yeah, so my question is, okay, so to kind of give a bit of a background, so I'm wanting to support children from the ages of 5 to 12 with their mental health. So my question is around, how do I gain support for a non-profitable business to help within the community, and how else do I set up a charity as well? So I'm a complete novice at this and I don't know anything about any of this kind of thing.
So it sounds to me, Lisa, like you'd fit quite well within the kind of GoFundMe category,
right.
Which is, more community driven, less financial return driven. Yeah, you might want to look at setting up as a CIC. That might be an easier way to do it. But yeah, I guess for me, I think within platforms like GoFundMe, they even have grants for local initiatives like this. And if you're registered as a CIC, they will release funds under their own charity structures. And a lot of companies, local companies, might sponsor you and back you as well, if you're running a community effort. So that's my quick take. I don't know if anybody else has any comments on this.
No, it's not a space I know a huge amount about, to be honest.
Yeah, that I think honestly, Lisa, the best advice I can give you is go look at platforms like GoFundMe and maybe build out a story as to why people locally should support what you're doing. I think you'll succeed.
I literally discovered you last night at like 4 o'clock in the morning, Simon. And I was just I've been reading like Rich Dad Poor Dad because even though I'm giving back to the community and helping within this as well, I am actually venturing out to be a coach myself. So I'm currently a teaching assistant working in a primary school, and I've seen that there's a massive gap within the education system and helping within the primary schools and from home life and education. So I'm also wanting to, as well as doing this as a charity thing, I'm also wanting to venture out into a business type thing, so kind of break free from the corporate, lifestyle, and also go into business by helping and coaching people with their mental health.
Well, Lisa, that's awesome. And yeah, thank you for caring about these issues. We need people like you in our communities, so thank you. And someone said in the comments just a moment ago, which is, there's probably some council funding opportunities too. You should go on the local council websites and see what the local grants are. I worked with quite a few libraries during COVID that were going to get closed down, and saved them by getting council grants around certain initiatives within the local ecosystem. So go and have a look at the council sites. And then on my TikTok, someone just said they could help you. Little Moon Design Studio said they would be willing to help you, but I don't know how to connect you to. But anyway, if Little Moon folks, if you DM me after this with your email address, I'll pass it to you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Are you in my Telegram group or in Discord?
I'm not. No, I've literally downloaded this today. I didn't even know it was a chat stream. I just thought it was a normal game. So I'm not into like gaming and stuff like that. I'm like, I ain't got time for that. But yeah,
no one here's got time for that either. We're using Discord as a community platform, not to play games, but maybe we should do that one day. But yeah, no. Well, look, I'm just thinking about how I send you the contacts of the people that are offering to help you right now on my TikTok.
Yeah, my email address is together.
Don't say it out loud. Don't say it out loud.
It's okay. It's a generalized one anyway. It's a generalized one.
In the chat though, before you do it, you can just go join the Telegram group that I would just put in the chat. So just go in there and just leave me your contact information. And then I'll connect you up. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm sure it's okay if people had your email address, but it's always better not to, just in case it's accidentally a password to your bank account or something.
Okay.
All right, cool.
Amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And please get some sleep though. 4 o'clock in the morning sounds pretty crazy.
Yeah, when you've got a mission on your mind, it's like, I've got to, get something working. Yeah.
I hear you. I was actually on live till TikTok till 1 o'clock this morning. So I know what you're talking about. Cool. All right. Well, nice to meet you, Lisa, and well done.
Thank you.
I think I'm conscious of your time, Stephen and Zach. We've got time for one more.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to probably disappear in about 5 minutes. Yeah.
All right. Let's see if we can get a few more folks up. So, Joel, do you want to let us know how we can help you?
Hello, hi.
Hey, Joel, how can we help you?
Are you with me, Simon?
Oh, Joel, you got very bad background noise. How can we help you?
Hello?
Yeah, how can we help you?
I just need to get I have so many questions running on my mind, but the time that we have, I don't think I'll be able to say those questions. But the one question that I have is, what do you need before meeting or contacting a VC? I understand that you need to have an MVP and also a traction of what you are building. But what if you don't have those? You're just starting off. What do you need to actually? What do you actually need before meeting those VC or grants or reaching out to foundations or organizations?
Very open question, so complicated. Basically, every grant will be different and what they expect. You have to go look at the criteria of the grant, but most grants will want some sort of entity to work with and some sort of proof of concept, case studies, examples, and some due diligence around like you're actually able to deliver the thing that you're pitching. As far as VCs are concerned, honestly, I wouldn't even use that terminology. If you're talking at the stage you're talking at, the best chance of getting money is family and friends, people that know you personally and believe in you and will back you based on you. And then maybe if you're lucky, angel investors that might see your vision and back you. Otherwise, that's why quite often I talk about personally about having some sort of MVP, something that people can say, oh, I see how this can work, and you've got slight proof of concept. Will make your life a lot easier in the sales process. Just imagine trying to sell a product but not having the product to show people, right? It's the same. You might get someone that says they'll buy the visual idea of your product, but most people will be wary and they want to see the actual product, right? So just think about it like that.
Okay.
All right.
All right. All right. Can I just want one more question?
I wanted to get to one more person, but okay, quickly.
Okay, in instances where family and friends have actually supported you well enough to actually start up, where can you actually get funds? Like, if you were in my shoes, what would you do?
Don't understand the question. Do you mean your family and friends are willing to support you or not willing to support you?
They are willing to support, and they've supported far enough to actually get us to where we are. And
Right.
support wasn't really well funded enough. If you were me, what would you do?
Ask them to fund you more?
Yes, yes, sir.
Yeah, maybe give them some equity to say thank you.
I didn't get you there.
Give them some equity to say thank you.
Yeah, I did. The thing is, they actually supported me, they funded me, but the funding isn't enough to actually get me to that stage. If you're in my shoes, what would you do?
I'd ask them for more money. I feel like I'm repeating myself now. I'd ask them to help me more. They've backed you already. They should keep backing you. One of the big mistakes I see a lot of investors make in the investment world is that they will back a founder and then that founder will fail. And then that founder will come back and say, I'm starting something new, and they'll back them again. And then the third time that founder's second time failed, they come back again and say, will you back me? And they don't. They don't back them the third time, when that's often when the founder actually does well. So you need people to keep believing in you, especially in the early days. And yeah, I think about my own career. It's the third or fourth company before I really made any real money for the people that back me. So tell them to keep backing you.
Okay, all right. Point taken.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
No problem. All right, now I know that Zach's time up, so I can't do anymore. I can't do it. Zach, thank you for your time.
No worries.
I know how busy you are, and it means a lot that you take the time out. We will be putting this up on YouTube as well, so that people who want to watch it back can listen to Stephen's brilliant idea and back him, and can of course learn from Zach directly as well. So thanks Zach and Stephen.
No worries.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Simon.
Cheers, guys.
Thanks, Zach.
All right, everybody.
Bye.
See you soon. Bye, everybody. Thank you.